What's up guys, welcome back. If you're new to my channel, hi, my name's Morgan and I make videos documenting my journey from digital marketing into UX design, and I offer advice where I can. So I guess I'm sort of at the end of that journey because I was offered a job and I accepted it. It's very exciting. I can't talk too much about it because I haven't spoken with HR or compliance yet about making videos about this. So once I get the go-ahead with that, I will happily make more in-depth videos about the process, what things are like, possibly salary information, but it all just depends on what they say is okay. Hopefully more on that soon. Even though I can't talk about the company or anything yet, I can talk to you about how I got here. So this video is going to be a step-by-step video on how to become a UX designer. So let's jump right into it. First, after you've determined that UX design is the right career for you, you need to determine what form of learning works best for you. So I have tons of videos on this, but the three basic ways to learn are self-teaching, joining a UX design bootcamp, or higher education. So self-teaching, you do your research on your own, and you're holding yourself accountable and you do everything on your own schedule. Bootcamp is basically a very condensed course about a specific topic, in this case UX design. That's the route that I chose. I joined Career Foundry, 5% off in the description. And then there is higher education, so undergraduate or graduate degree. Once you start learning design, you don't have to wait until after you finish your course or whatever syllabus or education form you chose. You should be designing all the way through. It is the absolute best way to learn. To get started, I would look into some of your favorite apps or websites or whatever you think is interesting, and I would look into the information architecture. Why did they include certain features? And overall, what makes it a good experience for you? Try and identify that. From there, you can try and actually recreate these apps in design tools like Adobe XD, Figma, and Sketch to start learning about how to use these tools and also sort of understand design principles and understanding your own style. I'd also recommend completing design challenges in your own time and just apply whatever it is that you're learning from self-teaching, boot camps, or higher education. The next thing that you're going to need is a portfolio. If you don't know what a portfolio is, it's basically a collection of your work that interviewers and employers get to see. Portfolios are essential if you want to be a designer, and it's usually the deciding factor of if you even get an interview, let alone a job. It basically lets hiring managers understand your design style, your design process, and just your general skills. Once you start making your case studies, you're starting to build your portfolio. And if you're not ready to design your own website yet, maybe you don't have the money, maybe you feel like it's not the right time, you want to wait till you have more experience, that's fine. There are other sites that you can use like Behance. The benefits of using something like Behance is that it's sort of like a social media where people can come across your projects, you can connect with designers, and it's free and really easy to use. But of course there are benefits to having your own website. I have my own website. You can have a more extensive About You section. It's more personalized. There aren't distractions of other people's projects. It can be seen as more professional. And you can also check your website analytics to see how many people are viewing your website and where they're from. So if you have an interview with somebody, you can see whether or not they actually looked at your website. And then of course, to apply to any job, you need a resume. Chunbuns has a video about her resume. I know that Truly UX also has a video about her resume. And my takeaways from those videos were to include design projects on my resume. So what you can do is you can work with local businesses or otherwise get contract work to put those design projects on your resume. Even if it doesn't get shipped, you can just explain what your role was. But my main advice for your resume is to really just include skills that you're actually willing to use. And what I mean by that is that I included basic HTML and CSS on my resume, and then I would get roles asking me about coding, when by basic, what I meant was I would be able to communicate with developers more easily, but not that I'd be okay with developing projects on my own. Don't add things that you think are going to be impressive if you're not actually willing to do them or you don't want to do them. tailor it to what you do want to do or what you're okay with doing. Say I did have that basic HTML or CSS coding skill and I was okay with doing that, even though that isn't what I would want my main job function to be, I would probably still include that if I was okay with it. I'm not okay with it because I definitely don't have the skill that they're looking for. Basic means different things to different people. Mine means conversational. Theirs meant I develop web pages. But at the same time, don't get too specific. So a little while ago, I was obsessed with extended reality. I still think it's super interesting and it may be something that I want to work in the future. But I started learning all these tools like Unity, Blender, C#, and I included all of that on my resume when it was unnecessary. I was applying to jobs that didn't involve that stuff at all. I was applying to regular UX jobs. The majority of UX jobs have to do with websites or apps, not so much something specific like extended reality or augmented reality or virtual reality, whatever it might be. So I was applying to these other jobs that have nothing to do with extended reality, but still having extended reality stuff on my resume. So what I should have done is I should have split up my resumes for regular UX jobs versus extended reality UX jobs. And I think that hindered me a lot. I probably missed out on a lot of opportunities because I was sending in these resumes that the skills really had nothing to do with the job. So if you are looking for something specific, I would just have multiple resumes. And once you have your portfolio and updated resume, start applying for jobs. I prefer to apply on LinkedIn exclusively. It's how I network. It's how I'm comfortable applying for things. It's how I find the jobs that fit me the most, especially because the algorithm eventually just starts adjusting to what you're looking for. That's my preferred method. Of course, there are other websites like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, SmartRecruiter, but I would really recommend using LinkedIn. I think that it's the most trustworthy website. While you're waiting to hear back, I would really work on putting together a portfolio presentation. That's what my last video was about. Go check it out. This is important because if you get offered an interview, you don't want to be scrambling trying to throw together a presentation. So I would go through your work and I would select 2 to 3 portfolio pieces to talk about and think about how you would use them to sell yourself. Then start interviewing. Take any interview that you can. Interview as often as you can because interviewing is a skill and it's something that you need to practice. What I've learned the most is that it really helps to avoid being all technical and hypothetical and really focus on your experiences and storytelling. A very common and important question that I used to falter on a lot was, what is my design process? I used to think that it had to be this memorized technical answer where I recited every aspect or step in the design process. That's obviously not what they're looking for. They know what the general design process is. They want to know how you work. So what I've started doing is I've started just going through one project because they know that the UX design process is never the same and it's never linear. And I always say that every time, but I said, in this one project, this is how I went about things. And I try not to focus on specific aspects of the design process. I focus on what I needed in order to move forward. So for example, the first thing that I always need to do is I need to understand the why. What is the problem? What are we trying to solve here? Instead of just saying, well, first I need to develop my problem statement. No, that's not what they're looking for. They want to know how you actually work, how you move forward throughout a project. Because if you just go through, well, I developed my problem statement and then I conducted the research, it's like, okay, but what is the research for? What is it helping you do? How did your research help you develop your user personas? Why are your user personas important? You know, like that type of stuff, not necessarily just, we did that and then that and then that. That's not what they're looking for. So that's something very important that I learned, and I try to apply that to all of my answers now. Well, not anymore because I don't need to interview. So focus on storytelling a bit more and memorizing a bit less. And another important part of interviewing is understanding your own values. I went into my job search thinking that my values were collaboration and mentorship. But after interviewing a lot, I realized that my number one priority is communication. If a company shows me that they have poor communication skills just throughout the interview process, that's a huge red flag. I have withdrawn applications, I have canceled interviews, and I have rejected job offers from companies that show me that they have very poor communication skills, because what companies tend to do is they tend to show their best face to people that they're interviewing. So I can't imagine what things would have been like if I was actually working for them and they already had me. Learn your values, learn what you cannot compromise on. So maybe it's a work-life balance, maybe it's a commute, maybe it's the job description. They might be coming to you saying that you have all these different responsibilities and you're not okay with that. That's okay. Through that, I was able to learn what actually mattered to me. That led me to the right companies, and it made me have better conversations with companies, knowing what I actually wanted, what I actually valued. Another thing that you can do while you're waiting to hear back from jobs is you can study job descriptions. Go through job descriptions, see what tools people are looking for you to know. So for example, I started to learn how to use Sketch because that was in a lot of job descriptions. Even though it's not my preferred tool, I know how to use it, and that just makes things easier to talk about in interviews. So when interviewers ask you about your tool set, you can say, well, I know these are my preferred tools, but I do know how to use all of these. Again, in this time, you can set yourself apart by putting yourself in a position to work in a collaborative role, which can be difficult, particularly for boot camp students that tend to work by themselves. You don't have any work experience so far. So some things that you can do is you can participate in design jams. So I participated in an Adobe Creative Jam, and I worked with a partner that I actually have talked about in my interviews, and I actually used it as part of my portfolio presentation to show how I worked through working with a partner. You can go watch that video. And you can also work with small businesses, so you can get that sort of stakeholder type of collaboration where you have to explain UX design to people who may not understand UX design, explain why it's important. Even if you're the only designer, like I said, even if it doesn't get shipped, that's still something that you can talk about in an interview and gain experience and explain what you learned from that experience. You can also connect with other designers, perhaps developers or UI designers or whatever, and do a conceptual project with them, or actually make a product, which I'm sure would be very impressive. But just get that experience of working with other people. It can be really important in interviews, and it will set you apart more from these other bootcamp students that only have solo projects, don't know how to work in a team, because that is a skill. It is something that is important to companies, is that you know how to work with other people throughout the design process and understand other people's roles, empathizing with them. So it's just something to consider that can set you apart from some of these other interviewees. And when you are doing these projects, do your best to focus on outcomes and results, because that's ultimately what businesses are looking for. The last step is to narrow down your search. As you interview more and you get deeper into interviews, you're going to learn more about yourself as an employee, teammate, and a designer. You might find that you're drawn to certain industries or specializations. Maybe you're a research-focused designer, or you're really into UI design. Maybe you really like the fashion industry, or you want to be an extended reality designer, or you want to do game design, or you want to focus on voice UI. As you learn these things about yourself, you can start to look for companies with positions like that. You can start to tailor your resume, your portfolio, your interview answers to those things that you actually feel passionate about, instead of just generalizing. And hopefully that will lead to the position that you actually want. Those are all of the steps that I have for you, but I do have some bonus tips for you. Money that you would normally put towards additional courses, I really recommend that you take that money and you put it towards your case studies. I really think that the big reason why I was offered this position was because of my portfolio presentation, and I presented 2 case studies. One of those case studies, I spent like $300 on a SurveyMonkey survey to get solid information as the foundation for this project. Use that money for surveys, use it for interviews, market research. Perhaps you can hire a UI designer. Invest in your projects. If you actually are really interested in something that you're creating, like I was, show that. Put money into it. I guarantee you that will have a higher return on investment than a course would, because interviewers don't care about your certifications. They really don't. Certifications are for you. Certifications and those courses are really to work on developing your skills. They're not something that a recruiter's really gonna find impressive, to be quite honest, because anybody can do it, I would really think about taking that money and paying people for their time for user interviews or usability tests and making your projects more credible, because I think that's what they were really impressed by, is like, oh, she would do all of this for a solo project. What if we paid her, you know? My next tip is to do research on questions that you hear a lot. So, for example, I always got asked, what are you looking for in this company? What do you look for in a role? And I would always say collaboration and mentorship. I want to be able to learn. And while that's true, it came off as sort of a selfish answer. So once I did some research on how to answer that question properly, I learned that what recruiters and interviewers are actually trying to understand from that question is, what can you offer the company? Why I want to work for that company shouldn't be so, well, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for. It should be more, if you have a personal interest in that industry, or perhaps they're a growing team and you really want to be a part of that growth. There's a lot of UX research involved in the role and you've always wanted to conduct more user research. Things that would benefit the company, not just like, oh, well, I want to learn and take and, you know, whatever. It's more about, I want to be able to do this for a company, because that is ultimately why they are hiring you, is not to provide you with knowledge, but for you to support the company. So start spinning it that way. You should have real reasons why, like, don't BS it. Tip number 3 is always improve. Never stop designing. Keep designing until you actually land the job, and you should continue to design on the side after that and just continue to develop your skills. If I stopped working on myself after I graduated my boot camp, I would definitely have not have been hired today. So tip number 4, even if you feel like an interview went really well, act like it doesn't exist. Keep applying to jobs, keep interviewing. Do not put all your eggs in one basket, because there are just some things that you can't control. You could have had an incredible connection with your potential UX manager, but someone might just be better than you. That's ultimately what it is. Someone could have a great personality just like you, but an additional year of experience. And those things are just out of your control, and it's got nothing to do with you. It's just the circumstances. So just always stay hungry. Do not think that you have to stop working or searching just because an interview went well, because that does not mean anything. Lastly, follow up, write thank you emails, and establish good relationships. So, funny thing about this job that I've been offered is that I've interviewed with this company before. We'll call them Company 1. And I was also interviewing with this other large company, Company 2, and I interviewed with them before too. So Company 1, the company that offered me the job, I interviewed with them one day after my UX design bootcamp graduation, and I didn't make it past the phone screening. The recruiter liked me and she said that she was going to push me through, but the hiring manager didn't want to meet with me for whatever reason. Now they're offering me a position. In Company 2, I interviewed with them before. I made it through a few rounds of interviewing, but they needed me to be able to do front-end development, and I just straight up told them I cannot do that for you. And then I followed up with the recruiter to see where we were with things, and she said that they were moving forward with someone else, but that if there were any other roles that she thought I would be good for, she would recommend me. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks, because, you know, recruiters say that all the time, but she actually did, because while I was interviewing with Company 1, I got an email from Company 2, a different department, saying that I was recommended for a position, and I wound up being a top candidate for this role. And I withdrew from consideration because I was offered a position with Company 1. But it's just so funny that these two companies that I've interviewed with before, I wound up being a top candidate for both of them. So establish good relationships, because they can really affect a lot. Just always be polite, never be ungrateful, write thank you emails, let people know that you really appreciated their time, and get feedback if you can. All right, guys, that is it for today. I want to address one last thing before I go. You guys add me on LinkedIn a lot, and I want to let you know, if you don't have UX designer or anything in your description, I don't accept people on LinkedIn. Also, if you have any questions, I get so many questions on LinkedIn, and it's just really difficult to keep up, because that is also like my professional network where I'm trying to connect with and recruiters and everything. So it's just difficult for me to get back to everybody. If you ever have questions, please just leave them down below. It not only helps my channel, also that way other people don't have to ask me those questions. I'll get back to you a lot quicker on YouTube. I would just appreciate it if you guys would stop messaging me on LinkedIn so much because I'm not going to be able to get back to you, and I want to. With that, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you could like this video and subscribe, I would appreciate it a lot. It helps me out, and I'll talk to you guys next time.